Welcome to a Legalbytes presentation of the Karen Reed murder trial. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel we make sense of the law one bite at a time. If you want more on the background of the Karen Reed case, check out our video on it linked in the description below. But otherwise, you be the jury. Did Karen Reed murder her Boston PD boyfriend John O'Keefe, or is she being framed by local police who Reed says are actually responsible for O'Keefe's death? Tell us what you think. But in the process, the one rule is don't be a dingus. Remember, everyone comes from their own perspective and opinion, and everyone comes to conclusions at their own pace. Agree or disagree, but always respectfully. Okay, let's get into it. All right, welcome back, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're coming in from. I hope you are having a good one. I hope you had a good quick break as we had it was a very, very quick break. But I had enough time to at least make myself some avocado toast, which I will be enjoying as we watch. Let's see here. Just realized I never did the social media push for the afternoon stream. I will also be doing that in the background at some point. But anyhow, neither here nor there. We still are on the second witness of the day, Maureen Hartnett. She's also the 52nd witness overall in this trial. Can you believe it? We've heard from 52 witnesses. We're not finished with the prosecution's case in chief. So, yeah. We're going to finish up the direct examination, and then we are going to get to cross-examination. So we'll see how this goes. I anticipate she's going to be crossed pretty hard because of the fact that she is, that swab of the clothes and all this other kind of stuff. She took some DNA forensics from the red Solo cups that were gathered. We're gonna be hearing about red Solo cups a bit more in this cross-examination, I anticipate. So, alrighty. And yes, thank you, Jerry Roth, in the chat. Don't forget the poll. I will also get that in as well. Let me get the pin chat and all that kind of stuff in, and then I'll get the poll going as we continue on this afternoon. All right. Let's see here. Where are we? There we are. All right. Let's get into it.
Good afternoon, Ms. Hart.
Good afternoon.
So with respect to the photographs that were just marked as exhibits of the orange T-shirt, that was item that was marked as 7-1. Is that correct? I'm sorry, 7-17.
Yes, that's correct.
So similar to how you had marked off areas of either damage or red-brown stains, was that similar to what you did with the gray hooded sweatshirt? Is that similar to what you did with the orange T-shirt as well?
Yes, that's correct.
And then there were two other clothing items that you examined, being a pair of jeans and a set of sneakers, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And with reference to the jeans, that was marked as item 7-1, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And with respect to the sneakers, that was marked as item 7-4, is that correct?
Each sneaker had its own item number. One was 7-3 and one was 7-4.
And with respect to the evidence as far as the stickers and sort of the denotations that you had made in regard to either damage or red-brown stains, was that similarly done with respect to each of those remaining clothing items as well?
Yes, that's correct.
You know what I may approach?
Yes.
So Ms. Hartnett, with respect to the jeans, showing you a series of 8 photographs. Do you recognize those?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
Those are photographs that I took of the pair of jeans.
And what's contained in those photographs, a fair and accurate portrayal of your observations of those jeans when you conducted your examination of them at the lab?
Yes, that's correct.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'll move the seat to introduce and admit the next exhibits.
All right, and there's no objection, you said, Mr. Jackson, correct? It's 2:42.
Yes, please. Your Honor, if I may, with the court's permission, publish some of the photographs in the packet from 232 to 241.
Okay,
Ms. Gilman, if I could have, excuse me, photograph 9862. Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's up on the screen that's now been marked as Exhibit 231?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's a photograph I took of item 7-17, the orange T-shirt, and it's the exterior front.
And Ms. Gilman, 9863. And again, Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's up on the screen as Exhibit 232?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's the exterior back of item 7-17.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 9867. And Ms. Gilman, if you could zoom in on sort of the upper right portion of that where the stickers are. Now, Ms. Hardy, do you recognize what's up on the screen as Exhibit 233?
Yes, I do.
And again, using the laser pointer, if you could draw the jury's attention to any items that you, or any areas of this shirt that you marked on.
I marked 3 specific red-brown stains using these stickers and letters A, B, and C.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could ask you to keep the zoom in, but go to the bottom left of the photograph. And similarly, Ms. Hartnett, within this zoomed-in portion of Exhibit 233, could you, using a laser pointer, could you draw the jury's attention to what, if anything, you noticed there?
I noted red-brown stain D, which I marked with the sticker, and D on the bottom right.
Last name, Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9873.
With all of these stains that are showing up on his clothes, I'm really wondering if the defense is going to like call into question like his positioning when those stains would have happened, because obviously there's no, or maybe not obviously, but I feel like at this point there hasn't been any testimony or any evidence that those were marks that bled through his shirt, right? Because so far we've heard from the paramedics, we've heard from, one of the doctors, the ER doctor that he saw, about his like his overall injuries. And there's been nothing about like deep gash wounds on his chest, for example. So those would have had to have dripped from his nose or his eyes or something. Like how did those get there? So I'm wondering if the defense is going to be pointing out, like, does it make sense for that to have happened when he's made impact on the ground? Or does it make sense for him to be standing up, for example, in a fight, and then it drips onto his shirt? I don't know. So that'll be interesting to see the back and forth on that, if that comes up on cross-examination, but we'll see.
And Ms. Hartnett, what's up on the screen is now marked as Exhibit 239. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could zoom in on the upper left portion of the photograph. And again, Ms. Hartnett, if you could, using the laser pointer, just draw the jury's attention to what, if anything, you noted there.
I noted this specific red-brown stain, and I marked it E.
Thank you. And Your Honor, similarly, with the court's permission, if I could publish what's been marked now as Exhibit 242 through 249.
okay.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 9878.
Yeah, Jay Roth. I don't know. I don't know what that was doing there. A bloody knife. I'm guessing it's for some other case, but why? Why would that be in the photo? Okay. Thanks. Okay. Gonna fast forward through this part. Okay.
Ms. Hartnett, direct your attention up to the screen with now the mark as exhibit 242. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that to be?
That's a photograph of the exterior front of the jeans with the belt, item 7-1.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 9887. And as you testified before, similarly to the other clothing items that you testified about, did you mark off certain items of interest or areas of interest on this item as well with respect to the jeans?
Yes, I did.
And is that depicted in this photograph?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 9888.
So it looks like his belt was in fact found.
And if you could just zoom in, just a bit, Ms. Gilman. And again, Ms. Hart.
I'm wondering if that knife was no, that wouldn't, because they said that it was shears that were used to cut the clothes off of him. So I don't know what that knife is doing there. Like what, maybe it had some sort of purpose in, I don't know, something. I can't say though.
And if you could, using the laser pointer before you, direct the jury's attention to those areas that you noticed or that you marked off in respect to this.
I marked off red brown stains A, B, C, D, and E on the front of those jeans.
Thank you. May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Hartnett, showing you another series of client photographs. If you could just review those. Do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are photographs of the sneakers, items 7-3 and 7-4.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth seeks to introduce the minutes of the next exhibits.
Okay.
No objection.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, Ms. Hartnett, with reference to the sneakers and sort of the other clothing items that you received, do you recall how or where or when it was that you received each of those respective clothing items? Or how the lab did, you know?
They were received by the lab from the Norfolk Detective Unit.
And as far as the sneakers being labeled with two different stickers, do you know why that was?
One of the sneakers was recovered from 34 Fairview Road, and one of the sneakers was recovered from the hospital.
Now, with reference to the photographs that I've just placed before you, have you had a chance to look at those?
These ones here?
Yes,
No.
if you could. And do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs now?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
Those are the fingernail clippings that were submitted for John O'Keefe.
And do you know where they were submitted from?
By the Norfolk County Detective Unit.
May I approach you?
Yes.
I'll call them up and see if you should do the minutes of next.
Okay. Thank you.
And Your Honor, with respect to each of those, I'm not seeking to publish those to the jury at this time. So,
Okay.
Court officer.
The lights back on, please.
Now, Ms. Hartnett, with respect to those stains on the gray sweatshirt, the orange T-shirt, and the jeans, what, if any, testing was done with respect to those stains?
A screening test was performed on each of the Rembrandt stains on those items. I'm sorry, did you say the sneakers? Could you repeat what items you're speaking of?
With respect to each of those respective clothing items, what, if any, testing was done with regard to any stains you observed on those items of clothing?
For the sweatshirt, the T-shirt, and the jeans, I saw visible red brown stains, which I screened for blood. The majority were also, I also performed a confirmatory test for blood. There was one stain on the orange T-shirt, however, that was too small to perform that confirmatory test. So for that instance, I noted that the stain was quantity limited, and I preserved it after the positive screening test instead of performing a confirmatory test in order to preserve enough material for any DNA analysis. As far as the sneakers, given their dark color, I did not see any visible red-brown stains on the black area of the sneakers, so I used an alternate light source to aid in visualizing any potential blood on those sneakers. With that alternate light source, I tested several stains on the sneakers, one of which screened positive for blood.
Now, with respect to the other clothing items that you were talking about doing the screening test and the confirmatory test for blood, with respect to the gray sweatshirt, the orange T-shirt, and the jeans, what were the results of that screening test and that confirmatory test that you ran with regard to each of those things?
The screening test and the confirmatory test were positive.
Now, beyond the stains, did you take any additional samples from those items?
Yes, I did.
And what were those and how was that done?
For each of the items, I picked up any loose trace material, which would be hairs and fibers or apparent hairs and fibers that were adhering to the item. I also did a scraping and swabbing for skin cell collection of the unstained areas, and that involves taking a sterile scalpel and swabbing the areas of the clothing that don't have any visible stains on them, and then taking 2 cotton swabs and swabbing that same area, and then combining those scrapings and swabs for potential DNA analysis. In addition to those, I also took a scraping of each of the materials, and that involves taking the item, using something like a flat metal spatula, and scraping down whatever adhering materials left on the item into a glassine packet.
And as far as those items, once they're collected from the material or from the clothing, what do you do with them from there?
Each of those items is given its own item number. It's a sub-item of the overall larger number used to mark the item, and those are sent to the appropriate units for additional testing.
And as far as preservation is concerned, when it comes to sending something to either the trace unit or the DNA unit, what, if any, steps are taken in regard to preserving those items once they're removed from the clothing and sent off to the other units?
Each of those items would be preserved according to protocol. They are sealed properly, initial and dated with my initials and date. They're entered into our LIMS system, so those sub-items could then be tracked throughout the laboratory, and they're stored in the appropriate storage unit.
It's going to be interesting to see her cross on all of the procedure for the DNA and all that kind of stuff.
Now, at some point, did you also receive items that were labeled as 3-2 and 3-3?
I submitted those when I returned from the original scene.
And what were those, ma'am?
Those were pieces of glass from the bumper and a drinking glass from the crime scene.
Now, did you examine those items?
Yes, I did.
And what, if any, examination did you do, and what is it that you were looking for in your examination?
I did a visual examination, and I took photographs, and then I also took a collection from each of the items.
And did you do any testing on those items?
No, I did not.
And what kind of samples did you collect from those items?
I took potential skin cell collection using a swab moistened with sterile water.
And as far as the samples that you took from, as well as the items themselves, what, if anything, did you do with reference to those once you were done with your examination?
The swabs were preserved for testing in the DNA unit, and the original items, the apparent pieces of glass and the drinking glass, were preserved for the trace unit.
And as far as those preservations were concerned, is that similar to the preservation process you were describing earlier with regard to the clothing items?
Yes, that's correct.
So both Mr. Lally and Ms. Hartnett, you have to keep your voices up, or we have to turn the air conditioning on.
Understood, Your Honor.
And also on that note, thank you, Your Honor. But also not on that note, completely different note. Josh, I thank you so much for gifting 5 more Legalbytes memberships. Very kind and generous of you. So let's see here. Catastrophe K8. Or is it Catastrophe Kate? Rita Venegas, Crystal Harris, Son of a Gun. You have all been gifted memberships, and Handsome Calvin. You have all been gifted memberships by Joshua. So welcome or welcome back to Bite Club. Very happy to have you all here. And thanks again, Joshua.
I may have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I don't have any further questions, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Hey.
Ms. Hartnett, you responded to Canton Police Department. A lot of your testimony was about what happened in the Sally Port, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You were asked if you responded to the Canton Police Department on February 2nd, and most of your testimony was predicated on that date, you going over there and doing some visual observations, as well as some removal of items and some other testing, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Was it February 2nd or was it February 1st?
May I check my notes?
I'd appreciate it if you did, yes.
My apologies. That was my error. It was February 1st.
Okay, so everything that you testified to, you only went once.
Yes, that's correct.
So everything that you testified to having taken place on February 1st, we should assume it was actually on February 2nd, we should assume it was actually February 1st, the one time you were there.
Yes, I was there one time.
Okay. Were you dispatched to the Sally Port? And I apologize, I'm not yelling at you. I'm trying to keep my voice elevated, so just so you know.
Understood.
It's not my normal speaking voice.
Yeah, I guess there's no mic.
You were dispatched at the behest of one of the Massachusetts State Troopers, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
The Detective Bureau specifically, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Trooper Proctor more specifically, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Trooper Proctor, you knew at that time to be the lead detective, the person that was in control of the investigation.
May I check my notes who I wrote down as the lead investigator at that
If it
time?
would refresh your recollection, sure. With the court's permission.
Yes.
Yes, I was told on scene that Trooper Proctor was in charge of the investigation.
All right. Now, while you were there, one of the things that you did initially was to just do an overview of the vehicle, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Obviously, that was important given the limited information that you had at that time about a potential motor vehicle pedestrian incident, correct?
Correct.
So you were looking for anything that would rise to a level of investigative concern regarding that vehicle, right?
Yes, that's correct.
hence your review and notation of certain scratches on the vehicle. Is that right?
Yes,
Which may or may not have anything to do with the incident, but you noted it anyway, correct?
I did not draw any conclusions as to where those scratches came from.
Okay, you just took the words right out of my mouth. My next question, the dent that you noted and photographed, you made no conclusion that that occurred as a result of a motor vehicle pedestrian incident, correct?
That's correct.
The scratches, and I'm just going to go through a couple of them. The scratches that you denoted and had photographed, you made no conclusions about that having anything to do with a motor vehicle pedestrian incident, correct?
That's correct.
Even the broken taillight, at that point, you made no conclusions or drew no scientific conclusions about that having anything at all to do with a motor vehicle pedestrian incident, correct?
That's correct.
You did, however, look for tissue, human tissue, blood, biological material, and things of that nature on the car itself. Did you not?
Yes, I did.
In that review, I think you testified that you saw nothing that suggested the transfer of human tissue to the vehicle, correct?
I did not see any visible stains or tissue on the vehicle.
You were told, Ms. Hartnett, that there were scratches on one of the extremities of John O'Keefe, correct?
That's correct.
Were you shown a photograph of those scratches to assist you in your visual review or examination of that vehicle?
Not at that time, no.
To this date, have you seen a photograph of his arm and the injuries to his arm?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, if I may, if we have it, could I display for the jurors and for Ms. Hartnett Exhibit 19?
Is this the one that's
The arm
That's
that
covered a bit?
has been
okay?
propped,
Yes.
Your Honor.
Fast forward a little bit.
Recognize what's depicted in. Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 19?
Yes, I do.
And you've seen that pattern of scratches previously, correct?
Yes, I've seen a photo containing
Okay,
something
and that's
similar.
consistent with the photo that you've seen since your visit to the Sallyport on February 1st, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Was there anything in your, by the way, did you look at all around the vehicle 360 degrees?
Yes, I did.
Did you look toward the top of the vehicle as well as toward the bottom?
I did not examine the roof of the vehicle.
Say
I did not examine the roof of the vehicle.
Understood. Did you examine the undercarriage of the vehicle?
I did look at the undercarriage of the vehicle.
And you know what I mean when I say undercarriage.
Yes.
Could you explain for the jurors what you mean when you use the word undercarriage?
The parts that normally you would have to see by, bending over or laying underneath the car to view what's underneath the vehicle.
That would include the frame and the axle and the drive shaft, transmission, things of that nature.
Yes, I'm not confident in all the terminology of the undercarriage, but yes.
Did you see anything that was suggestive of or consistent with the pattern of injury that you see to Mr. O'Keefe's right arm?
I wouldn't say I'm qualified to make any kind of pattern determination and what would match the injuries on his arm.
So the answer to my question is, as you sit here, you made no observation of anything on the SUV that matched these injuries, correct?
I wouldn't be.
Go ahead and answer that.
I wouldn't be able to testify from that from memory. I don't have a photograph of the undercarriage, nor did I make any kind of conclusions about that at the time.
Okay, understood. And you didn't take any, the swabs and samples that you did take variously on the car all came back negative for human tissue, et cetera.
The testing that I did on scene from the various areas of the undercarriage, which I mentioned before, the tire flaps, the edge of the bumper, and the exhaust pipe screened negative for blood.
Okay, Mr. Jackson, can we take this down?
Yes, I was just going to suggest that. Thank you, Your Honor. On February 1st, 2002, in addition to taking some swabs from the vehicle itself, you also mentioned that you took swabs of what you believe to be blood evidence contained in 6 solo cups, correct?
Yes, I noted those as frozen red-brown stains in red cups.
Sorry, we have to.
Red Solo Cup, I fill you up.
All right. Yeah, I'm wondering how she's saying that they were frozen, and also red brown stains. I don't know. I'm a little bit confused about that part about them still being frozen 2 days later. Magically so. I don't know, maybe Elsa came by because or did they put them in the freezer? In which case, which freezer? I have a few questions about this.
Were those Solo Cups in any way labeled among themselves? In other words, Solo Cup 1, 2, 3, 4.
I don't believe they were, but I don't have a photograph of that, so I'm not 100% sure.
You did not thereafter label those Solo Cups. If they hadn't been done beforehand, you did not undertake that to label those Solo Cups, correct?
No, I did not label them.
Did you, how did you take those swabs? Was the swab done in one Solo Cup, or did you take a swab from all 6, or how did you take those swabs that you ultimately did take?
I took those swabs from one Solo Cup.
How did you choose which of the 6 Solo Cups you were going to take a swab from?
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
I don't recall exactly how I chose which cup. It was reported to me that those cups came from the same area of red brown staining, so you make an assumption that they're all related. It came from what I was told, it came from one area of red brown stain at the scene.
And you, of course, know as a forensic criminalist that blood stains can contain multiple contributors, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You don't know as you sit here which blood stain found at the scene related to which Solo Cup in the bag, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No, it was my understanding they were all taken from the same stain, but I was not there.
From the same scene or?
Stain, excuse me. It was my understanding they were all taken from the same stain.
Okay. If they in fact were taken from multiple stains, you would have no way of knowing that as you sit here.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, why wouldn't they
And
examine all of
ultimately,
them?
once you did take that
Okay.
swab from that single Solo Cup, what did you do with the rest of that blood evidence?
I left that with the Canton Police Department.
Okay. That silence is deafening right now.
Was there any of the swab? By the way, I should ask this. I've been saying swabs. Was there one swab taken of that one from that one Solo Cup, or were there multiple swabs taken?
There were 2 swabs taken.
Of those 2 swabs, did you seek to do DNA testing, or was DNA testing done on either one of those or both of them?
DNA testing was not done on those swabs.
So as
Why?
we sit here now, there's been no DNA confirmation of what who that blood relates to, I should say.
There was no testing done on it at all.
And so therefore, we would not know if there were multiple contributors to those stains or that swab that you took from that single Solo Cup.
That's correct.
Okay.
Then why
And
did
again, the remainder of all of that,
why did you take the swabs in the first place? Just to figure out that that it was blood? But like you don't care whose DNA it was? I have questions. I have a number of questions. Like what is happening here?
Solo Cup, as well as all the other 5 Solo Cups, was retained by Canton Police at the Canton Police Department in the control of the lead investigator, Michael Proctor, correct?
I don't know who was in control of it once I returned it to the Canton Police Department.
Who did you return it to at the Canton Police Department? Whom, I should say.
I believe I gave it to a Canton police officer. I don't know which officer that was.
Michael Proctor was at the Sally Port at the time that you were doing your examination, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Did he not take control of it himself?
Not that I saw. I don't know who took control of them once I was done with my
You
collection.
may have, you just don't know.
Correct.
Okay. Going back to some of the damage that you did note on the vehicle, that vehicle looked like it had been driven to a certain degree, right?
Objection.
Can you answer that?
I'm not, if you could clarify the question, I'm not sure what you're asking.
Terrible question. Let me try it again. That vehicle was not a vehicle that had clearly just come off the showroom floor and had not been in use, based on your examination.
I don't think I am qualified to make that kind of decision.
It looked like there was some normal wear and tear on the car.
Other than the specific items that I pointed out earlier, the dent and the scratches, the exterior was in overall good condition. So I can't say specifically if it was driven other. I don't think I can make that conclusion unless you want to rephrase the question.
You didn't have any reason to believe that car was in any other condition than it had been owned and driven by somebody, right? Or could you make that conclusion?
I don't think I can make that conclusion.
So it could have been an absolutely brand new, right off the showroom floor car?
I guess I don't have any understanding of what could have happened to it in the showroom. I'm not sure I understand the line of questioning.
Okay, I think what he's trying to get at is like scratches and dents and things like that happen as somebody is driving a car, as they own it, et cetera, et cetera. So like you don't. I mean, he already established with her like she doesn't know definitively where these scratches and dents came from, if they already pre-existed, the incident in question, of course. So I think that what he's trying to get at is there probably are other scratches and dents on this car that that just were there as part of the normal wear and tear. So it's like, how do you distinguish between that and like what the prosecution is highlighting here as like dents and scratches that are indicative of her hitting John O'Keefe?
Why don't we move along?
Fair enough.
He's not doing it so great though.
I guess what I'm asking is, did you've done some damage analysis in the past? Obviously, this was not your first rodeo, right?
I don't do damage analysis of some vehicles.
Okay. Did this car look like it had reasonably normal wear and tear on it? That's my question.
I don't feel comfortable answering that question.
Okay. Ultimately, the right rear taillight housing was removed, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Were you the person, Ms. Hartnett, who actually used the tools to remove that taillight, be it screwdrivers, wrenches, anything else?
No.
Who was that actually did that work?
It was a Canton police officer that had entered the garage, and as I was removing it, he offered to help. He said he knew how to basically take it out of the housing, which at that point, I was not sure how I would do that.
Okay. I'd like to show you an exhibit that you'd been shown just a few minutes ago before the lunch break, 187, with the court's permission.
Okay.
Does that look like the same housing that you removed from the SUV, or you saw being removed from the SUV?
Yes, that is the taillight housing that I submitted to the lab from the garage.
Ultimately, there was a swab taken, you mentioned on direct examination, of that taillight somewhere on the house, correct?
Yes, I took a swab from that taillight.
Where exactly did you take that swab from?
I took it from the outer exposed areas, which would have been on the outer side of the vehicle. So I did not take it from the internal, what would have been the internal portion of the taillight when it was intact.
Can you point with a laser pointer exactly where you swabbed that taillight housing?
Sure. Is there a way that, can it get zoomed in just a little bit so I can differentiate the silver in the front? I'm having a little trouble.
Is that zoomed in enough, or do you need more?
I believe so. I can start. So I took it from the red area here that would have been exposed. And then if we could zoom in a little bit more just on this front area so I can differentiate between the internal structures and the external.
Was it one swab?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you swabbed multiple areas with one swab and then submitted that.
Yes.
So you don't know, as you sit here, where, if any DNA was detected, where that DNA may have come from,
No, that's correct.
other than the general housing altogether.
Yes. So that, just to finish your previous question, I did.
Sorry, I didn't even.
That's okay. It's just I couldn't see it. So this area here, which would have been the external portion of the taillight. So the areas I did not swab were any areas that would have, when the taillight was intact, been protected by the outer plastic housing of the taillight.
Is your testimony, Ms. Hartnett, that what you just pointed to was the exterior portion of the taillight, bottom left?
No, just this piece of plastic here is the exterior, the exterior piece of plastic.
And you swabbed that area as well as other areas on the exterior, like the red upper right.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. As you swab that, the DNA test does not differentiate where you swab, just that you swab, correct?
Yes, that's correct. That was all one swab, one collection.
Got it. So we can't define whether the DNA was to the upper right on the outside of the lens or some other place that you pointed to.
That's correct.
And of course, you're familiar with touch DNA, et cetera, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Touch an item, walk away, sweaty palms. Good likelihood I just left some DNA on this podium, correct?
Yes, you can transfer skin cells by touching an item.
Thank you. We can take that down with the court's permission.
Sure.
You also indicated that you collected glass from the rear bumper of Miss Reed's Lexus, correct?
Yes, I have it as a parent glass, but yes.
As a parent glass, fair enough. You labeled that as item 3-3, and it was 5 pieces of glass labeled A through E, right? A, B, C, D, E. Is that
May I refer to my notes?
with the court's permission?
Yes.
I'm just unfamiliar with the lettering A through E. I don't believe I have that in my notes. If you could refer to the
Is it,
document that you have.
is it possible that, and this is just ignorance on my part, is it possible that once you submitted that for further testing, somebody else may have labeled those individual pieces A through E? You did not?
That's possible. I do not label them A through E.
Okay, got it. Understood. Thank you for that clarification. As a matter of fact, you labeled it as quantity 1, correct? On an evidence submission form?
In the LIMS system, that's correct. Each item is, that quantity value is only used for specific things. So when I submit something as one item, it doesn't matter how many pieces it actually is. It's just, I'm submitting it as one item.
So in other words, one group.
That's correct.
But it's, so we're clear, and I want to make sure that these numbers are crystal clear. In that group, under 3-3, there were 5 pieces of apparent glass that you recovered, correct?
I don't have the exact number in my notes, and honestly, it's difficult to tell from my picture, so I don't want to say that I saw 5 pieces of glass.
Did you not annotate that somewhere, that you recovered 5 pieces?
Again, I have a photograph of it, but it's difficult to see on this printed page, so I didn't specifically write 5 pieces anywhere.
Okay, well, okay, then let me see if I can do it this way. Instead of pitching, let's catch. The person that you submitted it to would have annotated exactly what the grouping was that you submitted to try to be accurate.
I'm the one that initially, after the item was sent to fingerprinting, then I examined the item, but I didn't write down exactly how many pieces of glass were present. I just took a photo.
And as you sit here, you don't recall necessarily how many pieces you took off that bumper.
Correct. And the quality of the photo does not allow me to see that at this point.
Okay, let's take a look at that photo. With the court's permission, this is exhibit 168. Can we
Okay.
show that, display that? And if we could, Mr. Bates, with the court's permission, you can zoom in on the area, a little bit bigger than that. Capture all the documents. Zooming in at this point, and I would ask you, Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize this photo? It's zoomed a little bit. Do you still recognize it?
Yes, I do.
Is that a photograph that you caused to be taken at the Sally Port on February 1st, 2022?
I believe it was February 2nd, right? Did we, or it's February 1st now?
February 1st,
We agreed it's
okay.
February 1st. My apologies. Yes, on February 1st, I did request that photo be taken of the apparent pieces of glass.
Okay, and can you, I know you can't see necessarily every piece. Can you use your laser pointer and point to a piece?
Sure.
Okay, got it. So that's the largest of the pieces, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And it's correct that none of these pieces of apparent glass were embedded in the bumper. They weren't dug in, stuck into that hard plastic, correct?
No, I do not have that. I do not have that notation that they were embedded, just they were on the bumper.
As a matter of fact, they were physically perched on top of that hard plastic horizontal bumper, correct?
To my recollection, they were just sitting on the bumper, yes.
Okay. And do you know, just in your experience, and if we could leave this up for just a moment while I ask the next couple of questions, Your Honor.
Okay.
Do you know where Dayton, Massachusetts is?
I know the general area.
How far would you say that is from Canton?
I don't know, maybe a half an hour. I'm not exactly sure.
Do your notes indicate that the vehicle was recovered from Dighton and towed back to Canton and placed in the Sally Port before you started your examination?
Yes,
So and you also had been apprised before you began your examination that the incident in question took place in Canton, correct?
yes, that's correct.
So you knew as you were looking at this vehicle and doing your examination, the vehicle had to have been driven by definition from Canton to Dighton and then towed back from Dighton back to Canton, correct?
I was informed that the car was recovered in Dighton.
And ultimately either driven back or towed back. One of the ways, some way it ended up back in Canton, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so if Dighton is, how far would you say Dighton is from Canton?
again, I'm really guessing. I would say maybe a half an hour.
30 miles?
Potentially. I don't know exactly. I was never in Dighton.
Okay, so according to your notes, the glass pieces that we're looking at on the back of this bumper would have traveled, let's call it for round figures, about 60 miles in a blizzard before you saw it.
I don't know when the glass pieces were ended up on the bumper, so I couldn't say.
And of course, you knew that on February 1st, you knew a few days earlier, on the 29th, there had been a pretty significant snowstorm here in Massachusetts, correct?
Yes, I did have that information.
And that blizzard included high winds, freezing rain, snow, all the good stuff with a blizzard, correct?
I don't recall the exact weather conditions of the blizzard.
But irrespective, after all of that, whatever that was, you saw these 5 pieces just sitting perched on the top of the bumper, not embedded in any way, correct?
That's correct.
And you recovered those
So, oh, sorry. Let me,
with little bitty tweezers, correct?
Yes.
So, okay, so his whole point right here with this line of questioning is like, look, this was glass that wasn't like glass shards inside the body of the SUV somehow. This is just sitting on top of the bumper. Now there are ridges in the bumper, so there is that they could have been secured in there, but excuse me. But it's a good point though that basically that the defense can make this argument now that okay, so she drove this car from Canton out to Dighton, and then that was towed back from Dighton out to Canton, and like no photos were taken of it apparently for this apparent glass or what have you, and it wasn't until it was brought all the way back to Canton that they examined it. So what's the likelihood that glass that had fallen onto, just sort of sprinkled onto the bumper here would have stuck, would have stayed for, all the way until the point at which this witness is examining it? So what's the likelihood of that? This is introducing some reasonable doubt because it's based off of reason, based off of logic, not just sort of speculation. So interesting points. Whether that's convincing or not, we'll find out.
We can take this down with the court's permission. You testified on direct examination that you also found a hair on that rear panel, the quarter panel of the car, correct?
Yes, at the time of the scene, I noted it was an apparent hair, correct?
And the apparent hair, and I'll try to use that same word, I keep forgetting, you'll correct me. That apparent hair was not sitting on the horizontal bumper, but on a vertical portion of the quarter panel, correct?
That's correct.
Did you find the hair, or was that hair pointed out to you by somebody else?
I believe I located the hair.
How exactly was that hair secured to that vertical panel, if you can explain that?
This is my question too.
It didn't appear to be secured in any way. It was just on that quarter panel.
Okay, so it wasn't.
So that is weird. That is weird to me because, it going 30 minutes out to Dighton, 30 minutes out back, like even if it wasn't, being towed, like you can also say like with the towing for the glass pieces on the bumper, what's the angle, like what was, or what, at which part of the SUV did the tow truck secure the SUV? Was it the front or was it the back? If it towed it from the back axle, then maybe that's enough of an angle for the glass to stick. But if it towed it from the front angle or from the front axle, then that seems a little bit more likely that glass could bump off of it on the way back. But as it regards like the hair, that's just not secured to anything, like that's weird, because there's a lot of wind, there's a lot of, like, I don't know. It's just that's a very strange thing to, like, get stuck that easily to the bumper when it's not secured to anything.
Taped,
No,
it wasn't glued,
no,
wasn't stapled.
no.
It was not affixed in any way whatsoever. It was just perched on that vertical panel of the SUV, correct?
That's correct.
And for you to remove it, and by the way, you found this at the same time that you found that you found the glass pieces as well.
That's correct.
So that hair potentially would have had to make that same 60-mile round trip in the same blizzard.
At the time, I don't know when that hair was deposited on the vehicle.
Right. And it didn't take you much to remove that hair, correct?
I picked it up with a pair of tweezers.
It didn't give you any resistance?
Not that I recall.
Okay. I'd like to take a look at that hair if we can. I know you've seen it just a few minutes ago. I want to look at it one more time. With the court's permission, these are exhibits 165 and 173. If we could start with 165 and publish them.
Okay.
Does that look like a close-up view of, actually, is that a zoom? Yeah. Can we pull that out? Your Honor, may I do this a different way?
All right.
This is actually, with the court's permission, okay, I'll get to that in just a second. I want to try to. Okay. Your Honor, may I approach briefly?
Yes.
Thank you.
Only if it's brief.
I may hand you those very briefly. Could you take a look at those 4 photographs and tell me if you recognize the first 2 to be exhibits 165 and 173? They're not marked on there, but what you earlier looked at.
Okay.
Do those appear to be those 2 exhibits that you earlier saw?
Yes, I don't know what numbers they were, but I do remember seeing these photos earlier.
Fair enough. And then the second 2 photos, do those appear to be zoomed photos of the same 2 photographs?
Yes, they do.
With the court's permission, I would ask that the zoomed photos be marked as next in order.
Is there any objection, Mr. Lally?
No, Your Honor.
Can I approach?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. May I inquire, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, we're looking at what's previously been marked as 165. Does that appear to be a photo of the hair?
Would it be possible just to zoom in on that,
Absolutely.
the
This is not
sticker?
an eye contest.
And just a little bit, I'm just trying to read the letter on the white marker. Yes, so that, correct.
So that hair looks, as we're looking at it, you will agree, that hair looks like almost like a backward C, correct? In other words, it looks like it's more vertical than flat in that photograph, correct?
I would agree it looks like a C on the side of the car.
If we could go to exhibit 173. And this is the same hair photographed a second time, correct?
If we could, again, just zoom in on that sticker. Yes, that's correct.
Ms. Hartnett, does it look to you like
Yeah, they're right.
between the first and the second photographs, that hair has moved? It's no longer an inverted C, but a C.
I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I see the two ends, which may still be making contact with the vehicle. I can't make that determination based on this photo.
Fair enough. So that was sort of my next question. I'll just dovetail it this way. Did it appear to you that the hair, which is curled, was making contact with the vehicle on the top point and the bottom point?
I would say from this photo, I honestly can't tell if those two ends are coming off the vehicle or touching the vehicle. I just can't make that determination.
But you would agree that that hair was somewhat precariously perched on that vertical quarter panel, correct?
Objection.
I want to sustain the objection, ask it differently.
We can, Mr. Bates, we'll finish with that. With the court's permission, we can take that down. If you take a look at the zoomed photos that have just been marked as 259 and 260 respectively, can you take a look at those side by side? And when you're finished, I'd like to ask you a question or two about those.
Okay.
Does it look from your perspective, seeing those photos side by side, that the hair appears to have gently moved just a little bit between the two photos?
I just don't think I can make that determination. They're taken from different angles. I just don't know. I can see that they have a curl in both, but I don't know which ends are making contact or if the ends are coming off the vehicle.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, but either way, that's calling into question as to like just how secure it is on that. In other words, how could it have stayed on there after the 30 minutes of driving each way and being on a tow truck and all this kind of stuff?
There's one more exhibit I'd like to take a quick look at and ask you a couple of questions about. With the court's permission, exhibit 195, which is a shirt.
Okay.
Do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph?
Yes, I do.
And you saw this just a few minutes ago on direct examination as well, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You indicated that you took two swabs from the, quote, area around damage, numbers 1 through 9 of the gray sweatshirt, end quote, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, can you describe for the jurors how you took those swabs, and were they of all 9 or a select number of the 9? How did you do that?
I moistened 2 cotton swabs with sterile water, and then I took those 2 swabs. May I use the pointer to just show?
Of course.
And I vigorously swabbed around. I don't know if it's working. There we go. This entire area. So every area of damage, I swabbed around all of it using the same 2 swabs. So it was one collection from all those areas.
One collection on swab 1 and one collection on swab 2. You just repeated the process.
No, I took them exactly at the same time. So I held the 2 swabs together.
Oh.
And as I'm swabbing, I'm rotating the swabs to make sure that all the exterior of the swab is coming into contact with that material in order to collect equal samples, or at least attempt to collect equal samples on each swab.
Okay, we can take that. Thank you. And you indicated that this was the first time that you had done swabbing specifically for the purpose of trying to find either canine DNA or animal DNA.
That's correct.
Had you been trained at the time that you took the swabs, had you been trained or received any training or any teaching about the relationship between keratinized tissue and DNA?
No,
Do you know what keratinized tissue is?
no.
Did you photograph exactly where any of those swabs were taken, or just notate it in your notes?
I notated in my notes that overall photo is the photo that I used to describe the sample that I collected.
And I think it probably goes without saying, you didn't videotape your swabbing technique on that shirt either, correct?
That's correct.
You did include a handwritten note on your report that you found, quote, debris from T-shirt 717 and shirt 718, correct?
I performed a debris collection on each of those items. I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
That is what I'm referring to.
Okay.
Okay, so there was a note in your report that you had recovered some debris or you've done some debris collection, correct?
That's correct.
And you indicated in your note that the debris was from shirt 717 and shirt 718. Is that right?
May I refer to my notes?
With the court's permission.
Thank you. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and shirt 717 is which shirt?
The orange t-shirt,
And shirt 718 is which shirt?
the long sleeve gray shirt.
All right, so you took, is the right word scrapings?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, you took scrapings from both shirts, is that right?
Yes, correct.
And then combined those together and submitted that as the quote unquote debris that was assigned a new item number 7-18.18, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So as you sit here, you don't know where the debris came from specifically other than the two shirts. Could be one, could be the other, could have been a combination of both.
Yes, that's correct.
Did you describe in detail anywhere the actual debris that you found? Little fibers, little hairs, little pieces of green or blue or whatever?
If I was able to pick out a hair or a fiber, I would have attempted to do that from the debris collection. The debris collection was just anything that was left on the item that I was not able to pick off.
Okay, and you did not note any debris item that was plastic or plasticine, anything like that, correct?
No, I did not make any kind of observations on the debris itself.
And there was no marker put on any part of the debris that was recovered, correct?
That's correct.
And there was no photograph taken of the debris,
That's correct.
and there was no videotape of the debris collection.
Correct.
Okay. When you received item 717 and item 718, that came in one evidence bag, did it not?
Yes, it did.
Your Honor, may I approach briefly?
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind taking a look at that, that's a photograph. I'd ask you to review and tell me if you recognize it. Not the photograph, but what's depicted in the photograph.
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize that?
This is the container that contained it's a photo of the brown paper bag that contains the long sleeve gray shirt as well as the orange t-shirt.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Is this another Stop and Shop bag? Or is this a legit
I could
brown
ask
paper
that
bag?
be marked as next in order.
Any objections to Lally?
No, Your Honor.
Give it 261.
May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. This evidence bag notes, let me start over. This evidence bag is in the condition that it was in when you received it, meaning the writing on the bag was already there when you received it.
Yes, that's correct.
And it notes that these items of evidence were collected by Trooper Proctor, correct?
Yes, correct.
And the date of collection was January 29, 2022, is that right?
I'd have to relook at that
Of course.
for the date.
May I approach?
Yes.
Yes, it didn't.
Display
So you got an answer.
My
Right, I think-
apologies.
my mistake.
The date on there is January 29th, 2022.
So I don't have to walk back and forth, may I? Display
Yes.
this for service before commission? Okay, does that look like what you're looking at, exhibit 261?
That's correct.
Thank you. Let's see if I can stand out of the way. You see Trooper Proctor's name on the evidence bag as the person that collected it?
Yes, that's correct.
And it also has a description of what's in the bag, and it shows both the orange t-shirt and the gray sweatshirt collected together and bagged together, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And the date, again, once again, on the upper right is January 29, 2022, correct?
Yes, that's,
Okay. You have no way of knowing, as you sit here, the journey that those two items of evidence took before they got to you in your lab, correct?
yes, they're tracked as soon as they're entered into our laboratory system by us.
I didn't hear any of that. I'm so
My
sorry.
apologies. The item would be tracked as soon as it's submitted to our lab by us, by the crime lab.
Thank you. We can take this down, Your Honor. Thank you. The debris that you ultimately got from the shirt or shirts, you don't know if that debris may have been in the bag and the shirts picked up the debris in the bag or otherwise, correct?
Correct.
Because they were housed together,
Yes,
stored together.
that's correct.
Were you aware before you began your analysis on either one of those shirts that those shirts had been found at the bottom of an ambulance, on the floor of an ambulance at one point?
I don't have any knowledge of where the clothing, what condition the clothing in was before I got it.
Okay, and that probably answers my next question, but just for the record, you don't have any knowledge personally as you sit here that either one of the shirts or both of them were floor of a hospital room as well.
I have no information about where the shirts were.
One of the things that you did indicate was, in your direct examination, was how important it is to maintain sanitary conditions with evidence to avoid contamination, correct?
That's correct.
For instance, you wouldn't want to take the swabs that you so carefully utilized to swab an item of evidence and then, oops, drop it on the floor. You would have to discard that item and then start over, correct?
If a swab is dropped on the floor, we don't discard it. We would preserve it, but that would be a note that we would have to put in our file, and that, yes, that swab would not be tested any further.
Right, because of the possibility of cross-contamination.
Correct.
And at least according to the evidence bag, those two shirts were in the custody and control of which trooper before you got them?
Trooper Proctor collected the evidence according to the bag.
Thank you. Ultimately, Ms. Hartnett, every single piece of taillight material and clothing that you've described in your testimony today on direct and cross-examination, all of that evidence was presented to you or to the lab at one time in one bundle on March 14th, 2022, correct?
No, that's incorrect.
Which portion was in the lab before March 14th?
The tail light that I collected from the vehicle was submitted prior to that, as well as any other items that I took from the vehicle.
Okay, that was a great answer and my mistake. I knew that and I forgot it. So the taillight housing you took on the first?
Correct.
Okay. Every other item other than the taillight housing itself, which you took personal possession of, all the taillight fragments, all the clothing, orange shirt, gray shirt, jeans, shoes, everything was all submitted in one fell swoop on March 14th, 2022. Is that right?
No.
What else am I incorrect about?
So I just wanted to clear, anything that was collected from the vehicle, as well as the swabs from the red Solo cups and the drinking glass that I was presented with at Canton PD, was submitted by me on February 1st. The other items, the clothing items, were submitted together. And then there was another submission that had the fingernails and the known blood standards. So there were several submissions. So I'm hesitant to lump it all into one because it did happen on different dates.
Okay, fair enough. Can we agree that the earliest submission, with the exception of the stuff that you actually took with you from the Sally Port, the taillight material, whatever swabs you took, I'm sorry, the taillight housing and whatever swabs you took, all of the other material that was submitted to the lab, all of the other evidence, the earliest date anything was submitted was March 14th, 2022.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to take another look at my submission forms just to clarify.
May I approach?
Yes.
I think I have it. It's a
Okay.
two-page document, if I can show Mr. Lally. Is that a copy of your submission form?
Yes, it is.
Okay. If you could familiarize yourself with that for just a quick second.
Yes. Sorry.
Okay, may I approach one more time now? Tracking along. I have one more document I'm going to ask you to take a glance at.
Okay.
Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
What is that document, the second document that I just handed?
This is a printed chain of custody report from our laboratory information management system.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to mark the first document's name again. I want to get it right.
It's the evidence submission form for submission 7.
Evidence submission form for submission 7, 2-page document, if I can have that marked next in order. And then the,
Chain of custody. My apologies.
Is there an objection, Mr. Lally?
Yes to both.
So the objection sustained unless you want to convince me otherwise.
I'll have a mark for ID for
Okay.
the time being. That's fine. If that's okay with the court.
Yes.
Okay.
You've got a lot of your Post-its on the other one. Do you want to take it off?
I was going to actually ask if I think it would help with this.
Okay.
Go a lot faster with those Post-its
The
on.
witness, I guess. Go back to the witness with those, please.
At what's been marked as VV, that's the log. I just want to go through this relatively quickly. With regard to plastic pieces that were submitted, if you look on page, for instance, page 11, where a tab is.
Yep.
That shows that that piece was submitted on March 14th, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And there was a piece submitted on March 14th on page, notated on page 12.
What item are you referring to?
It's a plastic piece.
Yes, correct.
Page 13, another plastic piece.
Yes, submitted on March 14th.
And page 14, another plastic piece.
Yes, that's correct.
Page 15, another plastic piece.
Correct.
And page 17.
Oh, what happened? No.
That was next in order. And then the,
Chain of custody. My apologies.
Is there an objection, Mr. Lally?
Yes to both.
Okay. So we're a little bit behind. We're going to get caught up now.
The witness.
VV, that's,
So
I just want to
go
admit
through
it.
here.
On page
I hate it when
the
it
plastic
forces me
piece.
to be at
14,
live.
another,
Yes, that's correct.
page 15, another plastic piece.
Correct.
And page 17.
Oops. Sorry. Yes, that's correct.
And then if you turn to the next page, page 18, that's the orange T-shirt. It shows its submission date, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And what's that date?
March 14th.
And then on page, the bottom, very bottom of page 20, going into page 21, there's another item, the gray T-shirt or gray sweatshirt.
Yes, that was also submitted on March 14th.
Okay, thank you. I may approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
So we need those. They're marked for identification.
I'm not sure if I'm going to use it one more time.
Put them up on the bench and you can grab them.
Of course, man.
Yes.
Okay. Fast forwarding.
Talked about and all the items.
Nope.
Ms. Hartnett, before you received all of the items that we've talked about and all the items that you've testified about, with the exception of the items that you physically took with you from the Sally Port, everything else that you've testified to was submitted to you on March 14th or after, correct?
That's correct.
And all submitted by Trooper Proctor, correct?
I know they were all submitted by the Norfolk County Detective Unit. I don't know the specific officer that necessarily dropped them off at the lab.
Can you answer the question based on the log information that you have and the chain of custody that's in front of you? Can you answer the question whether Trooper Proctor or anybody else stored the taillight lens material and the clothing in the same place or in the same bag before you received it?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that question one more time?
Based on the log information that you have, in other words, the chain of custody that's in front of you, that you can absolutely look at and determine where things were and who had them, can you tell us whether or not Trooper Proctor or anybody else stored any of the taillight material and the clothing in the same place or even in the same bag?
No, I don't have any information to how the evidence was treated before it was received in the lab.
In fact, that's because there is no chain of custody for that data. I'm sorry, for those items. There's no data for those items predating March 14th, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
You don't personally have any chain of custody information about those items we just went over predating March 14th, do you?
I personally do not have any data that would indicate where those items of evidence were prior to them being accepted into the lab.
And one of the reasons why you have such detailed chain of custody protocols is to maintain control over where items go and how they're handled and by whom, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So that's important. That's important for the defense here. It's like there's this huge question mark as to who touched the evidence, when, where, what they did with it before the evidence got to her. So, she has so far testified pretty competently about, her job and what she's done and the procedures that she followed. But the defense is totally able to, because of the big questions that they introduced in the beginning with the Canton PD, that, basically she has no idea. She has no idea what any of these other people have done with this evidence before she got to it. She has no idea what Proctor did with it. She has no idea what Canton PD did with it. And so, so that's what the defense is jumping all over here. This is very important to the defense.
I have nothing further.
Okay, anything, Mr. Lally?
Perhaps.
Just a couple. The vehicle that you observed, the defendant's vehicle in the Sally Port of the Canton Police Station, that was in generally overall good condition, other than the areas of damage that you noted on the right rear, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And when you were swabbing, the swabs that you took from the taillight housing that you then later submitted to DNA, that was a taillight housing that you took from the Canton Police Station, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You logged that into the lab?
Yes, I did.
You took those swabbings and then you packaged them and you sent them to the DNA, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And all of those swabbings were taken from the exterior area of that taillight assembly, is that correct?
Objection.
The objection sustained is to the form.
Leading.
With regard to those swabbings that you took from the taillight housing, where on the taillight housing did you take them?
I took them from what would have been the exposed area of the taillight, should the taillight have been intact. So I did not collect from any of the interior portions of the taillight that would have been protected by the exterior plastic piece.
Now, at the time that you were looking at the vehicle in the Sally Port of Canton Police Station, do you recall what the temperature was inside the garage?
No, I don't have that information.
Was the temperature the same inside the garage as it was outside of the garage? If you know, was it heated at all?
I don't know if it was heated.
As far as the vehicle itself was concerned, when you saw it in the garage, did you see any sort of frozen snow or ice or anything like that on the exterior of the vehicle?
Not to my recollection, no.
John O'Rourke, thank you for the super chat. I can only imagine how they will rebut the evidence in the Brian Koberger trial. It took them months to find anything and being in a college party house. Yep. And I mean, the evidence there is somewhat thin, forensically speaking. Or I mean, real, not just forensically, but it just seems to be very thin how they were able to get him. So I anticipate that that's also going to be some big arguments by the defense there.
Nothing further on.
On that limited bit,
One follow-up question. May I approach?
yes.
If you've taken one more look at that, what's been marked for identification as you, that's the evidence submission form, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Who signed that form?
Objection.
So the objection sustained unless you want to see me at sidebar.
I'll ask it a different way. Whose name is on the bottom of the form?
Objection.
It's the same question. Do you want to come up? Do you want to come up to sidebar?
Yes, Your Honor.
May I have that, please, Ms. Hartnett?
Okay. We're going to fast forward through that.
With that,
Oops.
Muted.
thank you, Your Honor. With that, I have no further questions.
All right, Ms. Hartnett, you are all set.
All right.
Thank you.
Next witness.
All right, your next witness, Mr. Lally.
Yes, Your Honor, the Commonwealth call Mix Ashley Vaillier to the stand.
Okay, this is also from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab.
Step right up here. Just watch your step for me.
Okay, and also we're going to get some questions here before we get to it, because if they are about, I mean, I imagine they're all about the last witness. So let's do it. Well, it makes more sense. Mr. Baker, if the defense has to call Proctor because the CW won't, the Commonwealth won't, can they have him declared a hostile witness so they can ask some leading questions? Absolutely. Sarah Trurice, we need to have a Legalbyte snack of the day. You get a snack sponsor. We will buy it and snack together. Gourmet popcorn, anyone? I think that sounds lovely. I know normally I actually hate eating on stream, but between these super short lunches, which ends up giving me like 10 minutes in between, and the fact that I am growing a small human, I have some needs. So yeah, I'm definitely snacking a lot more on these streams than I usually like to, but you know, it's fun. We can all snack together, right? Travis James, why did it take 2 days for forensic collection? Good question. Nan R, Alita Legalbytes, I'm really enjoying your coverage. For me, you have the perfect amount of commentary and you don't overstep what you can't actually know. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I really do. Dianese Digiclo, I maybe missed it on direct. Did they do a DNA test on his single hair? Yes, they did. Because remember, she said that she cut the hair halfway through, so there was the follicle, the root end, and then the shaft end, and the root end was sent for DNA testing. From nothing. So Bites, what happens when KR is found guilty? Does the cover up get prosecuted, and who prosecutes that? That's prosecutorial discretion. So that is up to really up to the DA. I mean, yeah, that would still be state state law, I mean, unless there's some sort of federal laws that I'm just not thinking about right now, or not thinking of, that would be brought in to prosecute, so will this DA do it? I don't know. Joey G17, Legalbytes, I'm going to add during a snowstorm here in Massachusetts, we use a lot of salt on the roads. Our car would be white with all the salt during the snow. That's interesting too. So that also calls into question like the glass that was brought up, that was like on the bumper. I don't know. Would there be salt on that? I don't know. Mark Smith, we know she was screaming. It's what she was screaming that is in dispute. They all changed their stories. Oh, sorry. Wait a second. I thought that was supposed to be I meant to catch something. There was probably a chat right next to that one that I meant to get. Spider question, why is it that, so I apologize to whoever's chat I probably just missed. Why is it that Jackson couldn't ask who signed a document? On that particular question, I've got to say, I don't remember which document exactly that was talking about. I'm sorry. Janet G, I apologize. I didn't watch any recaps, but was there any summarization on what the kids testified to last week since it wasn't video recorded? I actually skipped that because it wasn't something that we went over here. But there are media reports about it, however. So there are some places that you can go. I think Court TV had a segment on it, and probably some other like media outlets as well. Pitbull Crew, is it common for investigators to submit items at different times? It's weird. It is weird. You would think that like you investigate, you find a bunch of stuff, you submit it that day. So that is strange. But we also know that the taillight pieces were found like in waves, I guess. So I don't know. Jerry Roth, isn't all evidence supposed to be gathered separately, or is it just from TV shows? No, I mean, Alan Jackson made the point on cross-examination that he said, you don't know if certain debris was on the shirt or on the sweatshirt. Does that make a difference to the jury? I don't know, maybe, but that can potentially. So yeah, it can make a difference if things are just sort of grouped together into one evidence bag, but they should have been separated. Generally speaking, I would think so. Alrighty, okay, let's continue on.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the evidence given to the court and jury in the case now hearing the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Lally, would you remove the, good afternoon, would you remove the exhibit that's on the witness stand,
Yes, sure.
please?
All right, Mr. Lally, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
My name is Ashley Vaillier, spelled Vallier.
And Ms. Vaillier, what do you do for work?
I'm a forensic scientist at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory.
All right, so Mix Vaillier, I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up.
Okay.
What we've been doing is we've had to turn the air conditioning off and we can't hear people.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, Mr.
And
Lally.
how long have you been employed at the State Police Crime?
Just over 5 years.
And if I could ask you just a little bit about your educational background, starting with your undergraduate work, where did you go to school for that?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in biochemistry and cell biology from University of California, San Diego.
Hey, that's where I
And
went.
following your receipt of that degree, where did you go from there?
I have a Master of Science degree in biomedical forensic sciences from Boston University.
And once you received that master's, where did you go to work after that?
I worked at the Broad Institute for about 6 months before getting a job at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory.
As far as your work at the Broad Institute, that's located in Cambridge, is that correct?
Correct.
And what type of work did you do at the Broad Institute?
I worked for the Center for the Development of Therapeutics Department, doing quality control checks on compounds that they think could have potential to be therapeutic drugs.
And so you went to work for the Mass State Police Crime Lab, or the MSPCL, in early 2019, is that correct?
Correct.
And when you first went to work for the MSPCL, what unit were you initially assigned to?
The Trace Arson and Explosives Unit.
Is that the unit that you still currently work in?
It is.
And so you started with the lab as a forensic scientist one, is that correct?
Correct.
And so what sort of steps or what kind of training did you go through in order to go from being a forensic scientist one to being a forensic scientist two that you are now?
A forensic scientist one is the initial job that you're hired as. After you've been at the lab for a year and once you're qualified and signed off to do casework, you become a forensic scientist too.
Now, within the Trace unit, can you describe to the jury sort of what types of things you're looking at or what types of analysis that you do with regard to working in the Trace unit specifically?
What I do or what the unit does?
First, as far as in general terms, what is a unit?
The unit has a lot of disciplines. So there's fire debris examination, explosives examination, serial number restoration, gunshot residue analysis, fibers, paint, glass, physical match, trace recovery.
And specific to yourself, what is it that you do within the Trace?
I do gunshot residue analysis, trace recovery, and physical match analysis.
And as far as each of those respective categories, is those the things that you've done essentially your time there, especially as a forensic scientist too?
Yes.
Now, with regard to, as far as the physical match component that you were talking about, can you explain to the jury, just again in general terms, sort of what goes into that, or what are you looking at, what are you doing in regard to your analysis with that? Physical match analysis is looking at two or more items that have broken or irregular edges and seeing if they fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. And when you're doing those examination of various items with respect to that, what types of instruments are you using, or what types of ways are you looking at these from an instrumental perspective?
It's mostly the stereo zoom microscope, which is a microscope that's mounted on a stand so that it can look at larger objects and not just slides like in science class.
Now, over the course of your work with the lab, you're familiar with the lab is accredited, is that correct?
Correct.
And that's accredited by an organization known as ANAB?
Correct.
And with respect to that accreditation, what if any testing or what if any examinations or continuing education do you have to undergo in order for that accreditation, either for yourself or for the lab itself?
As part of the accreditation, analysts that are signed up to do casework do proficiency tests every year.
And have you done proficiency testing over the course of your 5 years with the lab?
I have.
And specifically, what types of areas have you taken proficiency testing in?
I've taken proficiency tests in gunshot residue analysis and physical match cases.
So with respect to sort of each of the various areas of work that you do within the lab, is that correct?
Except for trace recovery, but yes.
And with respect to each of those, as far as the proficiency testing was concerned, you've successfully completed each of those?
I have.
Now, if I could turn your attention to, at some point over the course of your work within the Trace unit in the lab, did you become involved with the lab case number 22-02184?
I did.
And there's a name that's associated with that lab number as well, is that correct?
A name?
A name as far as a suspect or a defendant or something like that?
Yes.
And whose name is that?
Karen Reed.
And as far as your work within the Trace unit, how is it that you came to be involved, or what piece of analysis did you become initially involved in with respect to Ms. Reed's case?
I was assigned to do physical match analysis on, well, many different items.
Before we get to the physical match, was there something, what if anything were you asked to do with regard to some clothing items associated with the John O'Keefe?
I believe I later received debris that was collected from those clothing items.
And so debris specifically, do you recall which clothing items you received debris from?
I do not without looking at my notes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, may the witness look at her notes?
Yes, go right ahead.
And is your memory refreshed as to which items of clothing you looked at?
Yes, so it was, well, I didn't look at clothing. I just received the debris that was already packaged. So it was labeled as coming from jeans, boxer shorts, sneakers, a gray long sleeve shirt, and an orange t-shirt.
Now, with respect to each of those items had a lab sort of label number associated with it, is that correct?
Correct.
Is it your understanding that the larger piece of clothing would have been labeled 7- something, and then the debris from that clothing would have been labeled 7- same thing, point, whatever? Does that sound familiar?
It does, yes.
And so with specific reference to item 7-18.18, that was debris from an orange t-shirt, is that correct?
Yes,
And specifically, I'm sorry, debris from an orange t-shirt and a gray long sleeve shirt, correct?
correct.
And from your analysis of that debris, what if any examination did you do of that debris that was provided to you within the trace?
So each of these items was packaged in a fold. And so I opened up the fold and looked at the items under the stereo zoom microscope and documented it with photos.
And as far as that item, 7-18.18, what, if anything, did you observe as far as contained within the debris from that item specifically?
May I look at my notes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. There was apparent dirt debris, many black, gray, blue, and orange apparent fibers, several pieces of red apparent plastic, several apparent hairs, one piece of green material, and one piece of clear apparent plastic.
And the clear apparent plastic, what, if any, measurements did you conduct with reference to that?
It measured approximately 1/8 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch.
Now, from your analysis of those items, what, if anything, do you know where within the lab they went following your analysis there?
I believe another analyst in the trace unit then looked at those items.
And that would be are you familiar with another person who works in the trace unit named Christina Hanley?
I am.
And so what, if any, training does Ms. Hanley have that you do not have in order to conduct that sort of further analysis?
So Christina Hanley is the trace supervisor, and she is signed off to do casework in fibers, miscellaneous paint, glass. I see the other trace disciplines that I'm not.
So essentially, those items contained within that debris were something that you examined microscopically, made observations of, took measurements, and then they went to Ms. Hanley?
Correct.
Now, with respect to, you mentioned a variety of plastic items that you examined, correct?
Of the initial items that I looked at?
Yes.
Yes.
And what were those, generally speaking, what were those initial items that you looked
There were oof, many different items containing that I believe were recovered from an address, but I would have to look at my notes to.
Go ahead.
So they were all labeled as as recovered from 34 Fairview Road.
And what types of items were they specifically that you had received?
So it was many pieces of apparent plastic and apparent glass and one drinking straw.
And those items were generally labeled as items 7-5 through 7-19. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
And with reference to the process in general terms of when you receive these items, can you explain to the jury sort of your process and what you did and what you looked at as you went through each of these respective items?
Sure. So for beginning a physical match case, you always look at the questioned items first, which are the ones that you don't know where it came from. Like here, they're labeled as coming from the road, so you don't know where their actual source of origin is. And so what we'll do is we'll scan that item into my custody. And then I will document the packaging with photographs. And then I'll open that item and then document that item as it is. And if there are multiple pieces, each piece will get a designator like piece A, piece B, piece C. All this gets documented, written down in my notes and in photographs. If any of those pieces look like they could possibly fit together, then I will look under the stereo zoom and see if they do in fact fit together, and document it if they do. And then once I've finished documenting that, I'll repackage it in the original packaging. And then if there are multiple items, like in this case there were, then once that first item is sealed up, then I'll clean my bench and then I'll open the second item and do the same thing until all of the items have been documented.
And again, if you could describe to the jury sort of the physical process of what you did in this case with respect to these items, as far as how were you looking at them sort of physically, what did you do with those items?
So like I said, I opened up each of these items individually, took photos, took notes, looked at them under the stereo zoom microscope, and then looked at my photos after I had looked at all of them. They'd all been packaged in their original packaging. And then I looked at the photographs to see if any of those pieces could possibly fit together. And then once I looked at the photos and saw that it looked like there were possible physical match fits among those questioned items, then I opened up those items and looked to see if they, like in real life versus just on photos, see if they could have a potential physical match. And then if it looked like it did, then I brought them together and looked at that in the stereo zoom to confirm if there was a physical match.
May I approach?
Yes.
I'm showing you a series of 9 photographs. Just ask you to look at those and help when you finish. Recognize those to be.
Item 7-5.
And is that how it was presented to you or shown to you as far as the evidence bag that you opened and the items that were contained within?
I mean, this is just a picture of the seal, not the entire bag, but yes.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth seeks to introduce and admit as the next exhibits. No objection. Jury, please.
Okay.
And Ms. Tillman, if I could have photograph 1905. Next, Blair, what's up on the screen is photograph 1905, which has now been marked as exhibit 262. Do you recognize that?
I do.
And is that the evidence bag that you were presented with regard to items labeled as 7-5?
That's the seal on it, yes.
Now, just in general terms, as far as this process that you're talking about, sort of fitting the puzzle pieces together, how long and how laborious a process did that entail?
In this case specifically,
Yes.
there were many items to look at, so it did take quite a bit of time.
And if I could have photograph 1908. And do you recognize what's up on the screen, which has now been marked as exhibit 263?
I do.
Is that one of the pieces that you have from item 7-5?
Those are the 3 pieces in item 7-5.
And so the 3 pieces from that were all red apparent plastic pieces from that same item. Is that correct? May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Showing you another 7 photographs. If you can take a look at those. And do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
The seal and then the items from item 7-6.
And what's contained in those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed when you were doing your analysis in the lab?
Yes.
Your Honor, Commonwealth seek to introduce the minutes of next exhibits. No objection.
Fast forward some more.
Commission, if I could publish some of those photographs to the jury at this time.
Okay.
So, Mr. Lear, what's up on the screen that's photograph 1921, exhibit 271. That is the evidence bag or box that contains the items in reference to lab item 7-6, is that correct?
Correct.
And with reference to that, as far as the labeling is concerned, these are items that were submitted by the state police, correct? As far as you know.
Yes.
And from the labeling that's exhibited in labeling that's being shown in Exhibit 271, that actually has an indication of who the submitting agency is and the date that the item was collected, correct?
Presumably, I don't know because that's not our lab's labeling system.
It's fair to say, as far as your observation of these evidence bags as you were opening them, or boxes as you were opening them, they had different dates on them, some of them, is that correct?
I don't know. I don't know.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 1924. And again, what's up? Now, what's up on the screen that's now been marked as Exhibit 272. These were the items that were marked within that box or that bag of item 7-6. Is that correct?
Correct.
It appears two pieces of clear plastic, correct?
Apparent plastic, yes.
May I approach the witness room?
Yes.
Showing you another series of photographs, if you could review those, look open and finish.
Fast forwarding more.
And do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs, ma'am?
I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
The item 7-8.
And again, fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed in the lab with reference to item 7-8.
Yes.
I'm going to seek to introduce the witness. Okay. Ms. Vaillier, with regard to the items that were contained within these variety of bags or boxes that you had received as evidentiary items, what, if any, difference was there between sort of color, the size, the shape of the different items that you received?
Sorry, what? Can you repeat the question?
Were they all sort of uniform as to their color, as to their size, as to their shape, or what, if any, differences did you know between them?
Between the items that we've already published, or just all of them?
All of them in general.
So some of the pieces were clear apparent plastic, some were clear apparent glass, some of them were red apparent plastic, some of them were silver colored apparent plastic.
And as far as the size of these pieces of plastic or glass that you had received, how would you describe sort of their physical size, shape, things of that nature?
Some of them were very small, and some of them were larger. I can't tell you the dimensions without looking at my notes.
And you took measurements with respect to each of the pieces that you analyzed, each of the pieces that you examined, and each of the pieces that you ultimately tried to find a match for, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 1931.
Guna 1950, thanks for the super chat. She doesn't want to be there. Feel for her.
And what's up on the screen is now.
There are a few people who probably don't want to be there.
Do you recognize as the bag of rocks that contains item 7-8?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 1934. Now, what's contained in this exhibit up on the screen, number 279, do you recognize that as contents that were collectively sort of labeled as item 7-8?
I do.
And so from a variety of those different pieces that are depicted up on the screen in exhibits 279, each of them would have been respectively labeled as far as, say, 7-8.1 or 7-8 point something else. Is that fair to say?
So the laboratory numbering system where it goes 7-8.1, that's if you take like a subsample. So if I had collected like debris or something off of this, out of this item, that would then be labeled 7-8.1 because it's a new entry in our limb system. These are just the different pieces in 7-8. In my notes, I gave them labels as such as piece A, piece B, piece C, all the way down to, well, however many there were.
You label them individually as sort of letters, is that correct?
Correct.
Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 1938. And if you could zoom just a little bit in on that. And make clear what's depicted up on the screen within this exhibit of 282. Do you recognize that?
I do.
Is that one of the pieces that was submitted within this as far as 7-8 that you examined throughout the course of your analysis here, correct?
It was. There's actually two pieces in that. There's the large one in the middle, and there's a very small one up in the corner.
Okay.
Approaching. So we are going to, well, they're at sidebar. We'll fast forward. Oh, the jury's going out. I guess they're going to have their break. They are still approaching. Or they're still at sidebar, I should say. Okay, she's going to come back soon. Okay.
You are unmuted.
Okay, jury's coming back in. Let me get some questions really quick while we have this little break. Let's see. Oh, we talked about this one already from Pitbull Crew. L Borate. How is it the crime lab doesn't get video recorded? I don't know that it typically needs to. I don't know. I've never heard of a crime lab being recorded. Mackenzie Robite, do you think the prosecution feels good about how this trial is going, or do you think they don't feel so confident after how much the defense has brought up in terms of reasonable doubt? I have no idea. I have no idea how they're feeling about it because I don't know what other evidence they've got that they are planning to present. Joe Bub 1, just a note, all 4x4 vehicles are towed using a flatbed tow truck. I would like to know how the snow was removed from the Lexus. Was it brushed off? Was it allowed to melt in the garage? Those are good questions. Those are very good questions. Also, Buttercup 203. What month are you due? September. I'm doing September, so we're already getting along there. The time is passing in terms of this pregnancy. So yeah, that's exciting times. Okay, jury's coming back in.
Yes.
You recognize those, ma'am?
I do.
What do you recognize those to be?
Photos that I took of item 7-10.
May I approach?
Yes.
I'm going to keep introducing you as the next. Oh, there. And again, Your Honor, with court's permission, if I could publish that to the jury.
Okay.
Please come in if I could have photo 1952. And Ms. Blair, what's depicted up on the screen is that the bag of box that contains item 7-10.
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have 1955. And again, what's up on the screen is that the item that was contained within that evidence.
Yes.
May I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Showing you another series of photographs. If you could review those until we're finished. And Ms. Vaillier, do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
I do.
Or what do you recognize those to be?
The packaging that item 7-9 and 7-19 came in.
And what's contained within those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of those items when you received them at your station and within the trace unit?
It is.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
I'm going to seek to introduce and admit as the next. Okay. If I could just place these before you could take a look at those while the stenographer is marking.
All right, more fast forwarding.
And Your Honor, with court's permission, may I publish what's now been marked as 296 through 309 for the jury?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman, if I can have photograph 1958. And again, Ms. Blair, what's up on the screen is that the evidence bag or box that contains those items that you were just testifying about, 7-9 and 7-19.
Yes.
Now, with regard to, Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 1962. Ms. Blair, now what's been depicted up on the screen and been marked as exhibit 297. Ms. Gilman, if you could zoom in just a little bit on items of evidence, please. Now, contained within this are three clear pieces of glass or plastic, if you know.
I'd have to look at my notes to see what I wrote them as.
My other question, Your Honor, with the court's permission, may.
Yes, go ahead, look at your notes.
And after referring to your notes, what type of material is that?
3 pieces of apparent plastic.
Now, Ms. Gilman, if you could scroll down. I'm sorry. Up. Thank you very much. The item that's contained above those 3 pieces of apparent clear plastic, what is that?
That is item 7-19. That is a black straw.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 1964. And what's up on the screen, Ms. Blair, now, and it's been marked as exhibit 299. Is that essentially the straw next to a ruler with its measurements? Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, with reference to the photographs that I asked you to look at before, have you had a chance to review those?
I have.
And do you recognize what's contained within those?
I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
The photos I took of item 7-11.
And what's contained in those photographs of item 7-11, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed in your lab when you conducted your analysis in reference to this case?
It is.
Your Honor, Commonwealth seeks to introduce and admit as the next exhibit.
Okay.
Okay.
We're going to fast forward through this part.
Publish.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 1979. Again, Ms. Blair, what's up on the screen is that the bag, evidence bag that contains item 7-11.
Yes.
And for the record, that's been marked as exhibit 310. Ms. Gilman, if I could have 1982. And again, Ms. Blair, what's depicted up on the screen on exhibit 311, is that the items or the pieces of plastic that were contained within the aforementioned evidence bag in the previous exhibit, item 7-11.
Yes.
Now, with regard to the photographs that I just placed before you have you had a chance to review those as well?
I have.
And do you recognize what's contained within those photographs?
Photos of item 7-14.
And what's contained in those photographs of item 7-14, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what you observed in your lab when you conducted your examination in this case?
It is.
Thank you. Your Honor, Commonwealth seek to introduce in minutes of the exhibit.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're once again fast forwarding through this part.
Ms. Blair, if I could draw your attention up to the screen just for a moment, what's now been marked as exhibit 325. Do you recognize what that is?
I do.
That's the bag that contained item 7-14, is that correct?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I can have photograph 2012. And again, Ms. Blair, what's up on the screen is that the item that was contained, labeled as item 7-14 in that.
I'm sorry, I need all, please.
What What's depicted on the screen is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what was contained in the exhibit bag from the previous exhibits, labeled as item 7-14.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted. Were you able to review the bulk of those photographs that I just placed before you?
Yes.
And do you recognize those?
Yes.
And what do you recognize those to be?
The photos of item 7-12.
If I could have, excuse me, ask those to be marked as the next exhibit.
Okay.
Five 2015. Mr. Laird, if I could direct your attention up to the screen, what's contained and what's remarked now is exhibit 328. Those, the evidence pack that contained the items labeled as 7-12.
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph yours 2018. Mr. Laird, directing your attention up to the screen and what's now been marked as exhibit 329. Those are the items that were labeled collectively as 7-12 that were contained within that evidence back from the prior exhibit.
Yes.
Now, as far as those photographs that I presented to you a moment ago, have you had a chance to review those as well?
I have.
And do you recognize what's contained within those photographs?
I do.
And what do you recognize those to be?
The photos of item 7-13.
And what's contained within those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what was contained or labeled as item 7-13?
It is.
Your Honor, almost may I approach?
Yes.
Almost seeks to introduce the minutes and next exhibit. Okay. And Mr. Blair, what's depicted on the screen in that photograph, which now been marked as exhibit 343, is that the evidence bag that contained the items labeled as 7-13?
Yes.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2000. And Ms. Blair, directing your attention to the screen, those are the items contained within that exhibit bag from prior exhibits that have been collectively labeled by the lab as 7-13.
Yes.
As far as the photographs that I had placed before you, have you had a chance to review those?
I have.
And do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
I do.
What do you recognize those to be?
Photos of item 7-15.
And what's contained in those photographs, is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what was contained in items, item 7-15?
It is.
Your Honor, almost seek to introduce the minutes.
No objection.
Okay, hold on one second, Madam Court Reporter. Yeah.
Ms. Blair, if I could direct your attention to the screen, you recognize this as the evidence bag that contains item 7-15 that's now been marked as exhibit 352.
I do.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2077. Again, Ms. Blair, what's up on the screen are those the items that were collectively identified by the lab as item 7-15 from that evidence bag contained in the prior.
Yes.
Okay.
Buttercup 203, thanks so much for the super sticker. Very kind of you.
Now, Ms. Vaillier, as far as your analysis was concerned with regard to each of these items, and we'll get to that a little bit, I think, the next time. But with regard to the labels that you assigned to them as far as letters of the alphabet, A through whatever letter that you went, when you were conducting your sort of physical match analysis, how was that shown on a particular piece, or did you label those pieces, or how were you able to sort of quantify that?
The pieces that were large enough to, I printed out labels from a label maker with the lab number, the item number, and then the piece that the letter that I assigned it, so ABC, and my initials, and those are on the pieces.
And then as far as those pieces were concerned, if you were able to find some consistency between, say, piece A and piece B, and you were able to sort of fit them together, what, if anything, did you do to memorialize that sort of physical match?
Within the same item, if there were two pieces that fit together, I documented that with photos, wrote it down in my notes, and then if it was within the same item, I held it together with tape and then repackaged it still together as a single piece.
And as far as these consistencies or the matches that you were examining or looking for, was that solely within piece to piece, or at some point did you also look at sort of a larger piece as far as a housing unit for a tailor?
For this case?
Yes.
Yes.
And with regard to pieces that you had sort of put together, what, if anything, were you able to do with regard to some of those pieces and the tail light housing, item 3-1?
From those items that we just saw, I was able to piece one larger piece with many of those pieces all fit together into one piece that I then called piece 1. There were some other pieces that also fit together among those question ones that I called pieces 2, piece 3, piece 4, and piece 5. Piece 1 was a physical match with item 3-1, the taillight.
Your Honor, I think that may.
Okay.
Involve.
All right, so, Ms. Vaillier, we're going to have to have you back on Wednesday.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to wait. Jurors, so we don't meet tomorrow, we'll meet Wednesday, and we'll go a full day Wednesday with an abbreviated lunch and sometime between 4 and 4:30. So please do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into the case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about the case, please disregard it. I know we took a long time today with getting exhibits in before you, but it's a very important part of the case, and it does just take some time, so we appreciate your patience. All right, we'll see you on Wednesday.
Okay. So
You are muted.
Wednesday then. Sorry. That just, I don't know. The look on Jackson's face looked funny. Okay.
So you are all set, you can go.
Is there anything else that's going to?
So I was just talking to Ms. Vaillier about whether I needed to call Lawrence Court for her or not. So you are all set. Thank you very much. All right. You don't need me for anything until Wednesday? We'll see you Wednesday.
All right. Okay. So, oh, wait a second.
We're off, right?
Okay, they're going up for something.
So
Oh, wait.
Wednesday. So we'll see you on Wednesday.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, then that's it. Time for the fan, and that is it for today. All right, let's get some questions. And then we will be out of here for the day. Then I've got to jump on and work on that recap for today. Okay, Daniel Evans, are you doing a wish list for us to gift things for Baby Bites? Oh, folks have been asking for a while. I should. I just haven't gotten around to it just yet. Thank you so much for asking. That's so sweet of you. So, yeah, I just have to take some time to do it. Thank you. Buttercup 203, do you know the sex of the baby? So excited for you. September, not far. You don't even appear pregnant. Best of luck. It's your first. Thank you. Well, it's really just because of the camera. The camera's got it cut off here. But belly is definitely there. It definitely is a pregnant belly these days. So thank you so much. Very sweet of you. Yes, we do know the sex of the baby, but we're not sharing on the internet until we're like, I don't know, maybe comfortable. We definitely want to maintain some privacy for our kiddo, and this is our first. So you know, we want to definitely guard that privacy, because once it's out on the internet, once information is out on the internet, you know, there's no way to get it back. And so there's just so much out there about kids, and we just, you know, it's one of those things that we want to try to guard if we can. But we are very, very excited. Doctor Who 8675309, is there an easy way to determine how many actual hours for court versus possible hours? Feels like the court has used only about 35% of the available time. 5 days times 8 hours a day for most weeks. Well, I think that the number of weeks that they set for the trial, 6 to 8 weeks, I think that they knew that was including like some weeks that were going to have fewer days, like last week where it only had like 1 day. So I think that was keeping all of that into account. El Borate, hypothetically, your KR's attorney. At this point, would you advise her to testify? Hashtag not legal advice. Yeah, I don't think so. I at this point right now, I don't think that I've seen enough here that I feel like she needs to testify. In which case, don't testify. Catastrophe Kate. I don't know why I keep messing it up. Catastrophe Kate. Question: did I miss it? Did Jackson ask about the bloody knife in the picture? No, I didn't hear anything about that knife in the photo. So we have no idea what that knife was there, what it was all about. Joey G17, did they get fingerprints off the glass by any chance? I don't think so. There has been no testimony at this point anyway about any sort of fingerprints on any of these items. Would have been interesting though, right? Let's see here. Holly B, shouldn't all those pics be put in already? Poor court reporter. I mean, that's kind of what the judge was lamenting today, whereas there's just like so much stuff that is getting brought in the middle of stuff with the court reporters who's supposed to be doing all of these things all at once. And then the jury's just kind of sitting there. It's kind of wasting everybody's time. So the judge definitely wants these things to be streamlined moving forward. So we definitely saw that frustration today. Janet G, definitely keep some of those details private within your family. We can all wait to be surprised. Plus, we can do a baby poll with guesses on what Baby Bites will be. Oh, thank you so much. Very, very kind of you. All right. I think that's all the questions. I apologize if I missed anyone. I definitely want to try to get all of these. So, let's see. And also, yes, Debbie Faison Cook, are you setting up a PO box when you're in California? That is one of the things that I'm trying to do, so that folks can send things and then it can be just directly shipped over to us from there. So, yeah. Sheena Ford, I feel like Baby Bites will need to be in the baby name. I mean, yeah, it's so funny because even outside the context of YouTube, I've like started to refer to the baby as Baby Bites. So that's pretty funny. So anyway, all right, I think that's everything. That is everything. Thank you so much to everybody for joining. This was a bit of a longer stretch today because it was like the shortened lunch in between, although it ended at 4 instead of 4:30, East Coast time, of course. So, yeah, so we made it. So we don't have trial tomorrow, just like Judge Canone said. Wednesday will be a full day I will be live streaming from Catalina, Catalina Island in California. So that'll be fun. Hopefully the internet in that hotel is good. I'm sure it'll be fine. I have live streamed before from Catalina, so I anticipate it'll probably be just fine. So anyhow, but yeah, so that'll be full day on Wednesday, half day on Thursday, unless something changes with the court, because who knows. And then otherwise nothing on Friday, in which case we will be doing our members only live stream. So keep an eye out for the recap. I'm going to be working on that. And yes, and of course, as always, Albright, thank you so much for pointing this out. And also you usually point out the poll. I just remembered that. Ending that now, but shout out to the mods. They got their work in today. Oh, and yes, okay, I didn't even see that at the end, but you also said close the poll. So 1,100 votes, halfway into day 19. Which way are you leaning regarding KR's murder charge? 76% said not guilty. 16% said need more information. 6% said guilty. So, all right, fun times, y'all. So thank you to everybody for joining and for all the super chats and the memberships and things like that. Wonderful. Thank you guys. Yeah, I guess that's it. That's all we got. Okay. I'll see you guys in the next one. See you guys.